Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. You're listening to Right Side Up. My name is Mike Taglavia. I've got a couple of subjects I want to cover today, but we'll have to see how many I actually get to because we've got the first article I want to cover is, I think it covers a lot of things, both statewide and nationwide, and for that matter, worldwide. But I think it needs to be talked about, and people need a reminder. First of all, I hope you're enjoying that Mother Nature has finally sent us a convincing signal that winter is definitely here. So hope you're enjoying that prospect. I know for me, I was hoping that it would wait just a couple more weeks, but Mother Nature has her own mind up. So let me get into this article here. This is by someone who calls himself Cynical Publius, and I have found this person on X. I enjoy reading the posts from this individual, and at the end of the article, I'll read some of his background to you. But the article is dated November 14, 2025. It's in AmericanGreatness.com, and it's titled, Romania, Freedom Isn't Free, and Oblivious Americans. Even in Bucharest, a Romanian freedom fighter's warning proved clear. Too many Americans have forgotten the price of liberty, and some no longer care to hear it. Now, that right there is very telling. So, let me get into this. I'm on vacation. I was planning on taking a time out and not thinking or writing about politics for a few days, but somehow politics found me anyway. As a result, I feel compelled to write about what I just experienced. I think the things I witnessed are subtle yet quite important and highly worth sharing with anyone who supports liberty. I'm in Bucharest, Romania. As I write this today, I experienced a confluence of unanticipated moments that I can only describe as a sort of poetic synchronicity. I'll start with the nature of my vacation and my fellow travelers. Pun semi-intended. You'll see why. I'm on an Eastern European riverboat cruise on the Danube. The trip started yesterday in Bucharest, Romania's capital city. It's a pricey cruise that my wife and I saved up for, and our ship companions are almost all wealthy white Americans in their 60s and 70s. In other words, I am on a floating No Kings protest. While I'm sure there are more than a few MAGA conservatives along for the ride, what I have overheard in the public spaces of our ship so far suggests that more than half of our group are garden variety, bitter old Democrats. Another bit of background is important to this story. Today, Bucharest streets were gridlocked thanks to an enormous protest by a mass of labor unions. They were protesting austerity measures related to the national government's cutting back on the handing out of free stuff. Our pre-planned group city tour was badly sidetracked by this event, and eventually we collided with the protest in a deeply ironic way. So with that stage set, let me tell you the emotional events that motivated me to write this cautionary article. All right, let's see. Our guides promised us a surprise only on today's tour. And what a surprise it was. They took us to Bucharest Revolution Square, which was the site where in December of 1989, the Romanian people began to rise up to overthrow one of history's most horrific communist dictators, Nicolae Ceausescu. On December 21, 1989, while unrest was brewing across the nation thanks to nationwide poverty inflicted by communism, Ceausescu gave a nationally televised speech before a huge throng in that same square, attempting to motivate and encourage the citizenry during the fall of the Iron Curtain. Surprisingly, the crowd acted in defiance of the dictator and took the unprecedented and quite brave step of literally heckling and booing him en masse. As the shouts and boos echoed around the great canyon of the square, Ceausescu and his wife, Elena, suddenly realized that they had lost Romania and sought to flee the country. In a matter of days, the Romanian military largely turned against the dictator and his wife, and on Christmas Day, the two of them were adjudged guilty of democide, executed by firing squad, and unceremoniously dumped into an unmarked grave. Romania was free. However, in that uncertain period between December 21 and December 25, revolutionaries, the secret police, and the military, still uncertain where their loyalties lie, engaged in violent street battles, leaving many Romanians dead or wounded. Estimates range anywhere from about 1,000 to 7,000 murdered Romanians. One of those revolutionaries fighting in the streets for his freedom was a man, then only 15 years old, named Egmond Pușcașu. And I think I screwed up that name, and I'm sorry. A mere high school student, Pușcașu and his classmates knew Romania needed a better life and bravely fought in street battles against tanks and rifles, armed only with rocks and whatever other weapons they could find or make. Pușcașu's best friend and ally was hit in the head with a bullet from an AK-47 and died right next to him. Yet Pușcașu fought on. In fact, one of the most famous photos of the Romanian Revolution shows Pușcașu dressed all in black at the top of a truck. Which brings me back to the surprise of my vacation. I met Pușcașu. Our tour guides took our group to hear him speak in a small courtyard just off Revolution Square, and he vividly recounted those days of fighting and struggle. As a retired U.S. Army officer who dedicated much of his life to fighting for freedom and liberty, I was moved almost to tears hearing his story of courage and commitment to the best principles of human freedom. I had the great privilege of shaking his hand, one of the very few in my group to do so. So this is where I bring that poetic synchronicity back into the story. As we were listening to Pușcașu on the earphones our guides used to communicate with us, the labor union protest I mentioned earlier, trumpeting and banging incredibly loud horns and drums, slowly came trudging past us for the entirety of Pușcașu's speech. Think of the irony, a quasi-communist demonstration drowning out the voice of a man who long ago defeated the tyranny they aspired to once again achieve. To Pușcașu's credit, however, he told us he found that demonstration inspiring in that it proved Romania had become a free country where all voices could be heard, and I certainly agree with him. Now comes the part of the story that caused me to despair. Remember all those No Kings Democrats I mentioned? As Pușcașu was speaking, many of them were upset by his words. Some simply refused to applaud. Others showed looks of abject disgust on their faces, whispering amongst themselves and shaking their heads. Many took their earphones out of their ears and simply walked off while Pușcașu was still speaking. My wife, also a veteran, and I were appalled. Do these affluent, blessed Americans no longer understand the price of freedom? Do they really not understand? I firmly believe that too many Americans have lost the meaning of our Constitution and an understanding of the true nature of our liberties and freedoms, along with the price of those things actually cost to achieve and maintain. In a nation where a literal communist can become mayor of New York City, are we on a path to the Romania of old? If so, it will be because of indifference and stupidity, qualities I just saw on display in, of all places, Bucharest, Romania. Now, I want to break from the article, ladies and gentlemen. I talk about young people and schools a lot, and I think part of what we're missing here is that if we fix our schools, if we improve the curriculum in our schools, then we're not going to have to worry quite so much about this kind of thing gaining communism, Marxism, socialism, gaining traction in this country, because I don't believe somebody who was born in 1981 even heard of Nicolae Ceausescu in school. So they have no idea of the atrocities he and his wife and their regime committed. So this is one of the problems we have. And the other problem is people like this author is talking about, they lived in a crony capitalist society, they have their golden parachute. They have their retirement. So they believe that, socialism, I guess, is a great thing. But I wonder how much of their wealth and their piece of the pie they are willing to give up for others to get to where they are in their place in society with their level of financial security. So, back to the article here. There are other lessons to be learned from this story, and I would like to offer 3 of them. Our Romanian guides were so extraordinarily proud to present Pucașu to us. To them, it was like they were letting us hear from their version of the Minutemen at Lexington and Concord. In truth, they were. This too saddened me, however, as those beautiful Romanians still view the U.S. as the global defender of freedom. And ladies and gentlemen, I hope it remains that way for the remainder of my lifetime. A defender who helped them stare down communism and defeat the Soviet Union. Is their vision still correct? Is that still us? I fear against all hope that it may not be, and perhaps the world outside of the USA needs to know this. More importantly, perhaps we need to know this before it's too late. Ladies and gentlemen, he's correct. We need to know. Everybody needs to know this before it's too late. One of the reasons why I was so blessed to be able to have this venue, to be able to talk to you, to be able to bring articles like this and others every week. Too many Americans have forgotten or never realized the price of freedom. Too many of us have become fat, lazy, and complacent. Too many of us want free stuff, and too many of us are willing to sacrifice our freedom. Too many of us want free stuff, and too many of us are willing to sacrifice our freedom for that same free stuff, tiny bit by tiny bit, until it is all gone, and we have our own Ceausescu. I sincerely wish there was a way for the incredibly elegant Pucașu to come to America on a nationwide speaking tour so that he could educate many of our citizens, especially Gen Z, on the perilous path down which we so eagerly seek to tread. I fear, but do not know for sure, that too many of those Americans I am traveling with heard Pucașu's words and conflated Pucașu with Trump. I know Trump derangement syndrome is a real thing, but these are educated people. Our president is committed in every way imaginable to reducing the size, scope, and power of our federal government bureaucracy so as to preserve personal liberty. How can any thinking American conflate that with a dictator? Again, I despair at the willful ignorance of so many of my countrymen and women. Socialism and communism are death. Those who have lived this know it. The Romanian people know it. Too many Americans have forgotten it or never knew because our schools stopped teaching this truth. And that is very, very true, ladies and gentlemen. We find kids, young people, no matter their age, who have teachers who are glorifying socialism and communism without knowing how many hundreds of millions of people have died because of it. All right, back to the article here. I pray that some of us I pray that some as yet unborn 15-year-old American boy is not one day watching his friends die trying to restore American freedom. My day in Bucharest was a clarion call to remember how freedom is achieved and how it can evaporate. I felt privileged and humbled to earn this reminder. No American should say it can't happen here, because it can. Freedom is not the natural state of mankind. Tyranny is. We must remain ever vigilant lest we lose the spirit of 1776. As Ronald Reagan once said, quote, "Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it to our children in the bloodstream. It must be fought for, protected, and handed on for them to do the same. For one day we will spend our sunset years, or one day we will spend our sunset years telling our children, and our children's children that it was once like in the what it was once like in the United States, where men were free. So what do you think about that, ladies and gentlemen? Should we really seriously fix the education system, not only in Vermont, but in the country, so that we can finally have our children know what capitalism and freedom and our Constitution really truly means, not just to us, but our everyone else in the world? How many times have you ever come against or come up to and had a conversation with someone who has had the fortune to come to the United States from a third world country where socialism, Marxism, communism, whatever you want to call it, was in power? Just wondering. And we've gone way over here, ladies and gentlemen, so we're going to have to continue this when we come back. You're listening to Right Side Up.
Not everyone can get up every day and look for ways to piss people off. But here at GraniteRock.com, we do that almost every day. I can't tell you how many times someone's lost their SHIT and threatened to end us. But we're still here, pissing people off. It's almost like we enjoy it. And we've been doing it since 2006. That's almost 2 decades of news, politics, and opinion, and now podcasts, and we're just getting started. We believe in principles before parties and politicians. We defend free markets and individual liberty, and if that makes you mad, it makes us smile. We're like Grandma after she stopped caring what other people thought. If that sounds refreshing, you need to check us out. This is Steve McDonald for Granite Rock, and we'll keep shining the light on them for you.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. You're listening to Right Side Up. My name is Mike Taglavia. I just want to get a little bit further into this article. First, I want to give a little bit more credit to the author. Let's see. Cynical Publius is the nom de plume of a retired U.S. Army colonel and veteran of Iraq and Afghanistan who became a practicing corporate law attorney after military retirement. You can follow Cynical Publius on X at Cynical Publius. I highly recommend you, if you are on X, check out some of his writings. I enjoy reading a lot of his writings, and I think you will also, ladies and gentlemen. I want to read a couple of the comments because I'm just curious how many people might agree with some of these commenters. If I can make a few comparisons with the No King socialists and political realities. New York's new socialist mayor, Mamdani, is realizing the promises and reality are two completely different things. His free bus service just got shut down by Governor Hochul, with her stating that the state of New York does not have the available funds to do away with transportation revenue. In other words, no free buses. Mamdani's plans to turn the Elizabeth Street Community Garden just got blocked by Mayor Adams, designating the spot as a city park. As a newly dedicated and official park, Mamdani's efforts come into conflict with city ordinances against seizures of public land for private enterprise. As for his wealth tax and stock transitions fees, those can only be approved in Albany. So it is not only that freedom isn't free, socialism isn't easy. Where the DSA thought they could parlay 2 mayoral wins into in New York City and Seattle into beachheads of taking over the Democrat Party, they may well have ensured Democrat losses in the midterms, inasmuch as the Democrat base consists entirely of college-educated women, the university class, and urban elite. Failure to bring about the promised socialist utopia between now and next November may well suppress Democrat turnout. In my mind's eye, cynical Publius' description of the No King's affluent septuagenarians' reactions to Pucescu's speech, pulling out the earbuds, failure to applaud, the walking away served as visual prelude of voter reaction when all of the majestic promises fall to dust. When the Democrats' shutdown failed so miserably, I was little surprised that the media already had a slew of Epstein stories already in the queue to get the base ginned back up. However, that seems to have fallen flat when the promised release exposed nothing that wasn't already known before and appeared more damaging to Michael Wolff and the former Prince Andrew than to Donald Trump. So what I'm seeing is each left-wing, quote, bombshell turns into a dud, left-wing frustration with the inability to score any telling hits will demoralize voters even more. So I make a prediction. Come next summer, everyone should expect to see a, quote, trumped-up atrocity to take place to get the Utes out on the streets, overturning cars and burning buildings. It is all they have left. It is their last card to play. It may be connected to ICE in some way, or it may be connected to an arrest gone bad involving some, quote, innocent BIPOC. But the production is already being planned. The posters are being printed, and the actors are already in rehearsal. So, how many of you agree with that, ladies and gentlemen? That commentary, it's probably not too far off base. Let's see. I want to just check out one more with you here. This one says, trumped up atrocity. These people always run on what they caused. And just to step away from this commentary, we see this on a daily basis, both nationally and in the state of Vermont. We have policies that cause problems, and instead of reversing course on the policy and just admitting it was a mistake, it didn't give us the result that we wanted, we go and compound the problem by trying to fix what was broken, what the problem they caused with more of what they caused. So, who are the fascist kings and queens? Them. They are running on affordable health care and affordable everything else, and people actually voted for the economic pyromaniacs that caused the economic conflagration, and then they attempt to say that Republicans are responsible. So we've seen this over and over and over again. Let's see. It's always going to be Trump's fault based on their campaign rhetoric. Either they lie or distract, or usually do both in rapid succession. And why not, when dumbed down emotional dimwits, vote based on Trump and or emotions? They never let facts get in their way, despite taking many innocent over a cliff with them. Nothing else matters. So when you point out the outrageous, think that voters often don't care, even if they suffer as long as Trump and, by association, his supporters also do. To them, assassination of Charlie Kirk was a good thing. So, there's a lot of people, I think, out there who would probably agree with this. So you might want to check out the author. You might want to check out more American Greatness. So I want to move on to the next item here that I'd like to speak about. And this one is a little bit closer to home, but it's also something that could be applied nationally as well. This is from FYIVT, November 14, 2025. What is a fair share? Searching for truth behind the buzzword. Pay your fair share. It's a phrase that's been used so often in political debates and budget speeches that it's nearly lost all concrete meaning. How many of those other phrases, ladies and gentlemen, have we heard that have been beaten to death so that they really are meaningless? Nobody cares when they hear these catchphrases anymore. Like many feel-good slogans, it tugs at a universal desire for justice. But what does it actually mean when applied to taxes, government spending, or income distribution? Is there even such a thing as a fair share? Objectively speaking, and who gets to define it? To answer that, we have to pull back the curtain on both the numbers and the history. The numbers don't lie, but do they complicate things? Start with raw data. In the U.S., the top 1% of earners paid about 40% of all federal income taxes in 2022. Meanwhile, the bottom 50% of earners paid roughly 3%. This is an opinion, it's IRS data. When advocates argue that the rich need to pay their fair share, that raises the question, what number would satisfy that requirement? 50%, 60%, more? Let's flip it. Suppose we applied a flat tax rate across the board using 2024 figures. The total U.S. income was around $29.3 trillion, and total federal revenue came in at $4.9 trillion. That means a flat tax of approximately 16.7% would generate the same revenue as our current progressive system. Now consider someone making $30,000 a year. Under a 16.7% flat tax, they'd owe $5,010. For someone making $500,000, it would be $83,500. Everyone pays the same rate, but the dollar amounts differ substantially. It's easy to argue that this is fair in the literal sense. The rules are the same for everyone. But is it socially or politically acceptable? That's where things get fuzzy. Historically speaking, fair share meant simplicity. Historically, fairness in contribution often meant proportionality. In ancient societies and religious systems, tithing, giving 10% of income, was a common model. It didn't matter whether you were rich or poor. Everyone chipped in the same proportion. That idea had simplicity and moral clarity, and it was widely accepted. Things changed as modern governments grew more complex. During the early 20th century, progressive taxation gained ground, partly driven by ideas from thinkers like Henry George and later John Maynard Keynes. These frameworks assumed that those who benefited more from the system or who had greater financial capacity should contribute more. That shift reflected a move from equality, same rate for everyone, to equity, redistribution based on ability. But there was a philosophical price to pay. The modern disconnect, contribution without representation. As government expanded its responsibilities, so did the gap between who pays for the state and who benefits from it. Today, many Americans receive services paid for by primarily others. In Vermont, for example, the top income earners shoulder a significant portion of the state's revenue, while state employment is higher per capita than the national average, and salaries for public workers here are also above average. That's not a dig at state workers, it's a fact. And it leads to an uncomfortable truth. When fewer people are funding a larger apparatus that benefits many, the idea of a fair share starts to look more like a political weapon than an ethical standard. In pure economic terms, when spending growth outpaces revenue growth, as often happens in Vermont, the shortfall gets filled by increasing taxes on a shrinking number of higher earners, or through debt. Either way, it erodes the original promise of a social contract grounded in fairness. Who defines fair? Perhaps a better question is who gets to define fairness? For many libertarians and fiscal conservatives, fairness means consistency and transparency. You don't punish people for earning more, and you don't ask government to do what individuals, families, or local communities can do better. A flat tax or even per capita equal share contribution fits that worldview. On the other hand, progressives may argue that fairness means taking care of the most vulnerable and that a society is only as strong as its weakest members. To them, asking more from the wealthy is not just fair, it's moral. There's no escaping that these definitions are value-laden. But that's precisely why the conversation needs to shift toward concrete tools, not just rhetorical flourishes. The other thing, I want to break from the article. When we talk about fair share, if we have a progressive tax system, but we go and word it where there are exceptions, where the people who could possibly pay more And they actually do, ladies and gentlemen. When you look at the numbers of how many people, the smallest percentage of people paying the highest number of taxes, there are still ways, because of the way the tax law is written, that there are, for lack of a better term, these loopholes. They're not loopholes. They're written into the law. So, let's see. Imagine a simple tool, a fair share meter, that lets any Vermonter or American see exactly what they're contributing and what they're receiving. It could break it down by income level, display flat rate versus progressive outcomes, and even compare per resident costs for essential services. Want to know what it costs to run the state per person? Punch in your income and see how your share stacks up. It wouldn't settle the moral debate, but it would do something better. It would anchor the debate in reality. It would make it harder to hide behind slogans. We need more of that, ladies and gentlemen. We need more reality, and we need less hiding behind slogans. Everywhere, not just in the state of Vermont. All right. So there is such a thing as a fair share. So is there such a thing as a fair share? In principle, yes, but it depends entirely on what lens you're looking through. Fairness can mean equal treatment, equal burden, or equal outcome. And those ideas often conflict with one another. What we can say for certain is this: the truth gets clearer when you follow the numbers. And once you understand how much you're paying, how much others are paying, and where it's all going, you're in a better position to judge whether the system is truly fair or just politically convenient. We need more of that, ladies and gentlemen. Is it fair or just politically convenient? So, it's just there are a lot of things to think about. But I just figured this fairness thing right after the hearing about from cynical Publius about what he sees from the quote No Kings retirees on his cruise. I thought it was just a good fit for this next segment. So we've run out of time again with this segment. We'll be right back. You're listening to Right Side Up.
Hey, this is Steve from Granite Rock. I'd like to thank Mike Tagliavia and Right Side Up for being part of Granite Grok and Grok Media LLC's podcast network. You can check out all our programs every night of the week at 8 p.m., except on Tuesdays when we do Granite State Live, which starts at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Please make sure to check out all our programming, including Grok Talk, Granite State Live, Justice for All, Right Side Up, Manch Talk, The New England Take, and our newest edition, The Elsa Kurt Show. You can also check out content from Shadowband, The Blue Collar Intellectual, The Generation Report, and the Vermont Podcast. And be sure to visit GraniteGrock.com for news and opinion you can't get anywhere else.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. You're listening to Right Side Up. My name is Mike Tagliavia. Before we get into our next article that I'd like to cover, we need to just a little reminder, rightside-up-radio@gmail.com if you'd like to drop us a line. If for some reason you cannot get us on the radio, you cannot find us, you heard about us from someone, and you're not sure how to get a hold of us or find us to listen to, rightside-up-radio@gmail.com, or if you go to WNTK.com, find the podcast button and click on it. Scroll down to Right Side Up, and there's any number of our shows that you can listen to. You can hear us on Podbean. You can find us on GraniteGrock.com. You can find us on 802 Scoop Facebook and 802 Scoop YouTube. So, and thank you very much for all of you listeners. I'm very grateful. Now, I want to get into another article that it constantly is rearing its head in this state, and it's rearing its head apparently in other states as well. I think New York is going to be in a big fight over this stuff as well. And it has to do with the green energy nonsense. And this article is also from FYVT. Vermont's green credit con, clean state, dirty books. When cap and trade first rolled onto the national stage in the late 2000s, it was sold as a bold market-based climate solution. The idea sounded simple: set a limit on carbon emissions, let companies trade, quote, rights to emit, and let economics push carbon downward. In practice, it went over like a turd in the punch bowl. Voters hated it, industry hated it, even environmental groups turned on it. Not because they were anti-environment, but because they saw the truth. The system didn't reduce real carbon emissions, it only reshuffled paperwork. Trading permits didn't stop smokestacks, it just put a price on the smoke. So cap and trade faded as a brand, but the mechanism never died. It evolved into a family of markets with greener sounding names: renewable energy certificates, RECs, carbon credits, offsets, clean heat credits, and, quote, net zero trading. Different labels, same guts. And here's the consistent reality across all of them. These systems don't reduce actual carbon emissions. They just move carbon claims around while Vermonters pay the bill. And this is not someone's guess. This is a fact. We covered not too long ago the Shaftesbury Solar Project, which could do and potentially is going to guarantee this exact thing happening, where we have solar energy generation in this state, but there are no credits coming to this state. They go to an out-of-state corporation, and the electricity won't even be sold in this state, which is, it doesn't fix the price for electricity, energy in our state. So it really doesn't benefit anybody but a select few who are in on the carbon credit market. Let's see, Rex. The clean electricity Vermont generates sold off as someone else's climate victory. And this is absolutely happening. As a renewable energy certificate is not energy. It's a certificate that lets the owner claim the environmental benefit of 1 megawatt hour of renewable power. If Vermont produces clean hydro or solar but sells the RECs out of state, here's what happens. Massachusetts or Connecticut get to claim they use that renewable energy. Vermont is forced, legally, not physically, to pretend it used dirtier grid electricity. Vermont's reported carbon emissions go up, even though nothing changed in reality. Those inflated numbers justify new climate mandates. Vermonters' electric bills go up again. This is actually what's happening in Vermont, ladies and gentlemen. This is why your electric rates, no matter how many more solar fields you see, no matter how many more rooftops you see with solar, that your electricity rates are not going down. Physically, Vermont is one of the cleanest grids in the country. On paper, we look dirtier because we sold away the right to say we were clean. RECs don't reduce carbon. They transfer carbon credit from the producer to the buyer. A paperwork swap, not a climate solution. Carbon credits and offsets operate on the same principle. A company keeps emitting carbon. It buys a credit from someone claiming to reduce or avoid emissions somewhere else. The company gets to declare net zero. The underlying emissions, still there. The climate impact, virtually unchanged. This is what we call reality, ladies and gentlemen. This is what happens when you pull back the curtain. Most offsets don't deliver what they promise. Some never deliver anything at all, but the market thrives because the system isn't designed to reduce emissions. It's designed to create tradable environmental commodities. So when you hear people, and I've heard it in the legislature, oh, we need to create a market. This is why. Let me read that again. Most offsets don't deliver what they promise. Some never deliver anything, but the market thrives because the system isn't designed to reduce emissions. It's designed to create tradable environmental commodities. And every commodity market produces middlemen who profit handsomely. Brokers, consultants, verifiers, auditors, NGOs, and utilities. Everyone makes money except the ratepayer. Let's see. Clean heat credits, assigning carbon responsibility to the wrong people. This brings us to Vermont's proposed clean heat standard. We all know about that, right, ladies and gentlemen? This is that thing that was so urgent that we needed to vote on it last January. And then all of a sudden the numbers changed and it got put into cold storage. Remember that, ladies and gentlemen. It is not dead. It needs to be dead, but it needs to be dead because we vote on it and send it through the shredder because we voted no. So just remember that. Let's see. This brings us to Vermont's proposed clean heat standard. Essentially cap and trade for your furnace. This clean heat standard would have required heating fuel dealers to do three things: weatherize homes, install heat pumps, or buy clean heat credits to cover the carbon emitted when their customers burn the fuel. Here's the key point policymakers won't say. Fuel dealers do not emit carbon. Their customers do. A fuel dealer is a logistics provider. They buy fuel, store fuel, and deliver fuel. They don't burn it. They don't create the carbon emissions. Assigning carbon responsibility to them is convenient for regulators. You can't realistically regulate 150,000 individual homeowners, but it's completely disconnected from physical reality. It's like blaming UPS for the carbon footprint of whatever you buy on Amazon. And because dealers can't absorb these mandated costs, they do the only thing they can do. They pass the cost on to the customers. Higher heating bills, higher delivery fees, higher compliance charges, all for a credit market that doesn't reduce carbon emissions. Let's see. Across RECs, offsets, carbon credits, and clean heat credits, the pattern is identical. Carbon emissions stay the same. Nothing in these markets requires actual physical carbon reduction. 2, the right to claim reductions gets shuffled around. Let me read that again. The right to claim reductions gets shuffled around. Somebody buys a certificate, someone else loses the claim. Number 3, middlemen profit. Traders, NGOs, utilities, consultants, auditors, and regulators. Policymakers get talking points. That would be us in the legislature, ladies and gentlemen. Progress, ambition, climate leadership. Number 5, the consumer pays the bill. Higher electric rates, higher fuel prices, new fees, new mandates, new regulations. Oh, and by the way, maybe a new lawsuit. Remember the Global Warming Solutions Act with the right of private action? The state creates laws to fix a problem that doesn't exist here. Well, we've never done that before, right, ladies and gentlemen? When we finally get people who are willing to sit in a committee or stand up on the floor and say, you know what, we're only human. We do make mistakes. And the clean heat standard was a mistake, and we need to get rid of it. And there's a majority vote, then I'll believe that we are actually willing to take responsibility for mistakes. So keep your fingers crossed and keep praying, ladies and gentlemen, because session is just around the corner. Let's see, back to the article. But because RECs make us look dirty on paper, we build policy on a fictional carbon footprint. Vermont's actual reality. We are far greener than the books say. If Vermont stopped selling RECs and counted its clean electricity honestly, our electric sector carbon emissions would collapse to almost zero. We would be one of the greenest states in America, both physically and on paper. Many of the state's aggressive climate mandates would dissolve overnight because the numbers they're built on would vanish. Instead, Vermont sells the environmental value to other states, inherits dirtier numbers, and then enacts expensive policies to, quote, fix those inflated numbers. It's climate accounting theater. the truth Vermonters deserve. RECs, carbon credits, offsets, and clean heat credits don't reduce real carbon emissions. They don't clean Vermont's air. They don't fix climate change. They shift carbon responsibility to entities that didn't create and shift financial responsibility to people who can't escape it. What they do produce are higher electric bills, higher heating costs, more bureaucracy, and a narrative of crisis only to justify it all. Vermont doesn't need more credit schemes. It needs honest accounting and climate policy grounded in physical reality, not paper markets. And I can't agree any more with the author here, ladies and gentlemen. The author is absolutely correct. What we need is policymakers who have the best interests of the residents and voters of the state of Vermont in mind. And we don't have that right now. We do not have that. If we did have that, we would have a system where we take into consideration why don't we have a good, better, best system right now, where we have maybe the chip burning, the biomass plants, and the oil-fired plants are good, and better would be, I don't know, let's see, maybe natural gas, and then best would be nuclear. Well, why would you say that? I say that because we could power every home in this state with probably one, guaranteed with two, nuclear plants. Put Vermont Yankee back online, or at least put a small modular nuclear plant there to see what it's capable of doing. We now know that the nuclear waste, the quote-unquote nuclear waste that we have, is actually reusable for other purposes to actually deplete that nuclear waste and deplete the half-life that we were told for years, for most of my lifetime, that was so dangerous. We have a very small amount of so-called spent nuclear waste in this country, a very small amount. And now we know that we actually have a market for it. It's usable for something else. Look at the size. I would just love for someone to compare the size of the landfills in the state of Vermont, the state of New York, and the state of Massachusetts compared to the size of all of the nuclear waste storage, for the entire country. And I think everybody would be very surprised to see the vast difference, and that the nuclear waste storage for this entire country is exceedingly small. So, ladies and gentlemen, again, I'm very thankful that you are here to listen. I hope I was able to inform you and get you to think about some things and want to dig a little bit deeper. And again, we're coming up on the season, Thanksgiving. And I'm going to tell you right now, I'm very thankful for you as my audience. So we've come to the end of another show. Please remember, stay safe, stay informed, listen to Right Side Up.